Hi, I'm Nick Weber, and today I'm going to discuss everything you need to know about a cash reserve. It has been said that 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and this means that roughly 8 out of 10 people would be in trouble financially if their paycheck were to stop. Living paycheck to paycheck is an uncomfortable lifestyle choice because for anyone living that way, any financial emergency could put some serious stress and pressure on their finances. And if they ever lost their job or became disabled, that could totally devastate their finances. I think building a proper cash reserve is absolutely one of the most critical things you can do if you want to ever get ahead financially and someday become affluent. Having a cash reserve can help insulate you from going into debt as well as liquidating your other assets at a bad time. And if you are subject to more debt and liquidating your assets at the wrong times, then you're being extremely inefficient with your money and you'll never have a strong enough base to actually build from. Let's say you had a financial emergency or your paycheck stopped. What would be your options to cover your expenses? If you had a cash reserve, you could use that to cover short-term expenses. Otherwise, without a cash reserve, you would need to go into debt or liquidate your other assets, such as your retirement account, which could mean other penalties and taxes as well as poor market timing. Going into debt or liquidating your other assets could potentially set back your financial plan by years. I know that keeping a bunch of money in cash takes discipline, and it also isn't exciting. But a cash reserve needs to be thought of as your asset and debt insurance, since this reserve is your first line of defense in protecting your financial plan from an emergency. And it's not a matter of if you have a financial emergency, but when. Financial emergencies happen all the time. Not having a cash reserve is why so many Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, struggling with debt, and having so little saved for their retirements. I find that most people who don't have a cash reserve either never knew how important one was, they don't have a financial strategy in place, or they lack financial discipline. And I think that most people have a combination of all three of these issues, meaning they don't know how critical a cash reserve is, so if they have extra money in the bank, they are usually searching for ways to either spend it or they use it to pay down their debt. If you are having debt issues, then I highly recommend watching my Get Out of Debt video before continuing. So how do you get your cash reserve started? Well, first, you need to allow for savings to be in your budget and start saving your money. If you want help budgeting, then I also highly recommend you watch my budgeting video. Okay, so once you start saving, I recommend you initially save the money into a savings or money market account with your bank. So if you did need the funds, they could be immediately available with an online money transfer. It is critical that you get your budget and priorities straight first. Having cash in the bank doesn't mean you can afford more things. You can't afford something until you've saved up for it and/or if it fits in your budget. Your cash reserve should be off limits for anything except for paying for unexpected necessary expenses that otherwise would put you in debt or cause you to liquidate other assets. A vacation, new car, new toy, or something like that are not reasons to spend your cash reserve. If you want to have more money for the rest of your life, this asset and debt insurance is absolutely critical. Otherwise, you are always one step away from going into debt and having compound interest working against you, or hitting the reset button on your net worth and not allowing compound interest to work for you. Making compound interest work for you is absolutely critical in becoming affluent, and you are putting all of that at risk by not having a cash reserve. So how much should you have in your cash reserve? The answer is different for each person. However, most financial professionals, including me, recommend you have at least 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenses or income set aside for financial emergencies. A 6-month period became the baseline cash reserve goal because on average it is estimated that it can take as long as 6 months to find a new job if you ever lost your job. Also, if you stopped working due to a disability, it is very common to have a 6-month elimination period, also known as a waiting period, before your disability benefits begin to pay. Therefore, having a cash reserve equal to 6 months of your monthly expenses or income should be enough money to support your household through a job loss, a disability, or hopefully to cover most other expenses that could arise unexpectedly. Many professionals believe that a cash reserve that covers 3 months of expenses should be adequate if you have a household with 2 incomes coming in, and a 6-month reserve if your household relies on only 1 income. The idea behind 3 months for 2 incomes is because if one of the incomes were to stop, the other income and the 3-month cash reserve should presumably be able to cover your baseline needs for a 6-month period. Also, you can use this calculation based on monthly income if you're more conservative and like more money in the bank, but I personally think it's acceptable to use your baseline monthly expenses in the calculation because if an emergency did happen, you could stop making savings payments as well as cut out frivolous entertainment costs. The main concern is the ability to pay your bills and survive without devastating your finances. I also think that there becomes a point where keeping too much money in cash beyond a certain threshold actually starts to cost you more money due to missed growth from your opportunity costs. So it's up to each person to decide how much money really is enough for them to maintain in their cash reserve. I recommend having a 3-tiered cash reserve. I believe that having a tiered reserve helps in 2 ways. First and foremost, this strategy helps reduce visibility and accessibility of the cash reserve, and therefore reduces the temptation of spending these funds on something other than an emergency. And second, it helps you add efficiency to your reserve by earning more interest on it. Keeping large amounts of your money in cash or in your checking account is almost always a guarantee to reduce your long-term purchasing power due to inflation, so the more we can prevent this long-term loss, the better. Therefore, I think you should never keep your cash reserve in your checking account since it will most likely be spent frivolously as well as have a very hard time keeping up with inflation. Finally, I think it is acceptable to have some physical cash kept in a safe or safety deposit box, but I do think that there are some risks in keeping too much physical cash in your home. I personally know people who have had giant safes stolen out of their houses by crews of thieves. And therefore, since an insurance company won't insure your cash, I would prefer to rely more on FDIC insurance at my bank than by risking my funds in my own security by keeping a lot of money hidden in my safe or under my mattress. I consider the first tier of your cash reserve to be your checking account. I know I don't recommend keeping your cash reserve in your checking account, but this tier is really just here to show the most liquid form of your money and how the flow of funds works when you need to access your cash reserve. The whole point of an emergency fund is to have the funds available when there's an emergency. Therefore, the checking account is the first tier for accessibility. Next, in the second tier of your cash reserve, I recommend you save an acceptable buffer of funds into an account that is one step removed from your checking account. These funds should be held in a savings or money market account at your bank. This buffer should be what you could potentially need immediately if an unexpected expense were to come up, such as a car repair, a trip to the emergency room, equipment needed to do your job or schoolwork, but mainly for some sort of expense that could be covered by easily transferring funds from one account to another with your bank. In my opinion, this account should hold somewhere between $10,000 and 50% of your cash reserve funds. For most people who have discipline issues, or for those who want to try to maximize the interest they can earn in their cash reserve, I recommend holding less in this tier. Either way, if you like to see money in the bank, feel free to keep more in there. But since most people do have discipline issues, I don't recommend keeping too much in this account since it's only one balance transfer away from being spent. Finally, the rest of your cash reserve funds should go into the third tier. In order to earn more interest, this account would most likely be a more difficult step removed from your checking account. I recommend to keep the funds in either a CD ladder at your bank, a structured investment product, a fixed or fixed indexed annuity, or in a conservative mutual fund. I like having these funds held in any one of these options because it will usually have a better chance of earning more interest than what your savings account can offer. And also, this account is even further removed from your hands and would typically take several days before you could access these funds. This really helps with not liquidating the account on an impulse because of the delay that occurs in liquidating and requesting the funds. Also, I feel there is no problem in keeping these funds in these investment vehicles because your cash reserve tiers 1 and 2 should have enough funds to cover most unforeseen emergencies, which would require immediate access to cash. Finally, what I do like most about this tier is that the funds are typically held away from your bank, and therefore you don't see it every time you look at your bank account, which should help reduce the temptation of spending these funds. If you want to explore your options for your third tier of your cash reserve, then consult with your current bank, financial advisor, or use me and my team as a resource. When it comes to choosing your financial strategies, you have to consider two things. First, what's the most efficient way of managing your finances? And second, which strategy has the best chance of success in all environments and circumstances due to the emotional behaviors you have when it comes to your money? I think having a tiered cash reserve solves most, if not all, problems people have regarding their cash reserve issues because it helps prevent you from living paycheck to paycheck, it offers liquidity, it typically earns more interest than your checking account, and it reduces accessibility to prevent impulse spending, and most importantly, it can help prevent you from liquidating your other assets or going into debt if you fell onto tough financial times. So what are you waiting for? Get started on building your cash reserve today. My goal is to help more people become affluent through education and asset management. I hope that you find these videos extremely helpful and can use this information to work towards becoming affluent on your own. If you get tired of doing your own research or don't have the time and energy to manage your own strategies and assets, then let my team help. We work with clients all over the United States and can help you virtually so you can work towards becoming affluent from the comfort of your own home or office. To learn more about our services, visit my website at www.nickweberwealth.com.